How you doing? How you doing? And how you doing, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy Patty, and I appreciate you stopping by today. And today we're going to be here taking a look at Doctor Strange Skill Guide. Now, we're going to go over a couple of builds and everything, and essentially, if you're looking for like just a straight Doctor Strange build guide where like we're getting into the costumes and equipments and the Omega cards and all that, that's not what this is. That's not what this is. We're going to go over some skill build guides because I think that's what is going to help people the most early on, because a lot of that stuff in terms of costumes, Omega cards, or any of the other, I think Battle Pins is the other one. None of those are going to be super important, or at least at the point to where you're actually able to start min-maxing them and kind of going in a real direction build-wise. You can start in like the 40 to 50 range, start guiding yourself in some of those directions. But for the most part, for where most people are going to be, we're going to focus on some build guides for Doctor Strange that I think are going to perform the best for everybody. So let's go ahead and get into it and look at our minds. Also, real quick, if you guys want to go ahead and help out a smaller channel, hitting that subscribe button, hitting the like button, or leaving a comment, all of those things are very big to the algorithm. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of our videos, go ahead and hit that little bell icon a little bit, because we like to cover a lot of different mobile games and stuff on this channel. And the way that YouTube's algorithm works is kind of on a per game basis when it comes to gaming subscriptions. So it's a little weird. So there's a good chance you might not see my videos if we start covering something else. So always a good idea to, hit that little thing so you always get your notifications. Sometimes YouTube will still just be like, nah, every once in a while. But let's go ahead and get into the build guide itself. And so for the first one we're going to look at is essentially going to be the early game one. Early game, I would argue, we ain't going into squad info. What are we doing? Let's back up real quick. So I'm running around right now with a boss killing build, and we'll get into that one in a second. But let's go ahead and back it up, and I think this is going to be one of the most impactful builds for people from level like 20 up until mid 40s, 50s. And a lot of these skills I still use in certain builds to this day. So let's take a look at them real quick. First one is Master of the Mystic Arts, and we have it on its second mastery, and it's pretty big. This is absolutely amazing for grouping enemies. Very first edition of it kind of just throws some shackles on whatever is closest to the target that you're actually on when you hit the spell. This has a much wider range and really lets you take groups and just go, you're all here, which is a brilliant setup move. I think this is probably one of the strongest things in this man's kit. Not necessarily just this skill specifically, but his ability to control big groups of monsters and really just start going to town. So we got that one for our first skill. Second one, and this is one that I used for so long. It is so very good, and it's the Chain Reaction Mastery on 7 rings of that. We're just gonna go with that for right now. But as you can see, this essentially just jumps between a bunch of targets. It is really nice consistent damage, and as you start noticing when you unlock other masteries for those skills, sometimes the original versions of the skill just don't really do damage anymore. Like, it's almost like they're obsolete, you can't use them. Specifically for the very first rank of Eye of Agamotto, this becomes absolute trash the second you unlock any other skill. Like, it is very sad how little the very initial version of it does. See if it'll actually load. And it's not bad because it'll zap a bunch of things, but it zaps them for essentially imaginary amounts of damage. Even when you have a good amount of skills, like for me right now at level 56, this still hits like a wet paper towel. Like, it is just not something that I can feasibly use anymore. Yeah, you don't really get that much of an issue with this chain reaction. You get so long use out of it. I think you get it in the 20s somewhere, I want to say. And oh my god, it's just, wow, it's absolutely beautiful. You will use this for a very long time, and it will do a fair number of bounces. But when they're alone, you can target them and hit them with it, and it'll still hit them a good number of times. I think and don't hold your boy at 100% here, but I think it does less hits when it's just a single target. So even if there's just two things up, it's very beneficial to hit him with that, because you'll get more damage on the single target that you really want damage on. So if you need to drag them to somebody so that they're actually around someone for that skill to go off, it's going to be a nice move for you. You're going to get your damage. So another thing that I like, especially in this early build, because this is going to be one of the hardest hitting skills. If you actually look, it does 1,175% damage of your attack. And yeah, that's an early move. Hit him like a truck, just right out the gate. It hurts so bad. And with the moves that we have here, and the next one we're going to get into, right after you tightly group, or maybe freeze, a bunch of enemies, this is like your 1-2 punch, and it hurts really bad. So it's really effective, especially when you're going through the zones, you're doing all the quests. And a lot of the times the quests are just, hey, kill 15 to 30 of these things, or it's like 2 groups of them and it's like 15 and 20 of them. Stuff like this where you're grouping them and then hitting them with really heavy attacks, that is really going to speed up your leveling process. So I cannot recommend it enough, because this is the highest bonus damage you will get off any early skills whatsoever. Like, arguably still to this day one of the harder hitting ones, but you know, we only 56 right now. I can't talk too much smack about end game skills because we ain't there yet, but we'll talk about them early and mid game skills, boy. So this is a brilliant heavy hitter, you know what I mean? And we've got our boy here on its second mastery, Invitation to the Abyss. And what might be kind of hard to tell from that animation is that there's just a giant purple field that gets made. Everything inside of that field when that move is initially cast, frozen. Unless they're a boss character, then they don't get frozen. But because of its wide range, if you do your best to kind of kite the boss and keep them inside of that circle, if they're still in it when the thing essentially breaks you, and you can kind of see at the end, it kind of shatters, does some damage, there's some knockbacks. It's got a medium guard break on it. That is one of the best guard breaks that you'll be able to get early game, and being able to hit bosses with these is really important. Because the bosses have guards, you can break their guard eventually, and then that gives you a free window to just beat on them. And with the number of times you're fighting bosses in this game, you absolutely need something in your kit that is still going to be focused on being able to be leveled against bosses. You know what I mean? You have to have, you can't just do a crazy AoE everything, because then once you get into a boss fight, your AoEs aren't going to mean anything against that single target, and you might get a little bit bullied. This is a great move for that. So just try to keep them inside that circle if possible. Do your little circles, run for your life inside this window, and this can pay really big dividends for you early on. Next one we got, and I know we talked a little bit smack about the very first iteration of it, but we do have the Eye of Agamotto, and this ties into what we were just talking about with bringing stuff into your kit that is going to be there just for doing boss damage, or not necessarily just for doing boss damage, but give you a lot of advantages in boss fights. So the very first mastery of this, makes it do a considerable amount more damage than its base form, but it focuses on attacking a single enemy, usually whatever enemy you're closest to or that you have hard locked on. It does not have an amazing range, but the beautiful thing about this skill is once you cast it, homie's just out here with you for 10 seconds. So anything you do in that time, he's just hanging out, blasting if you're close enough. Best way I found to use this is for me to be able to, when I'm dodging boss attacks and weaving in and around them, having this guy out to add consistent damage to those periods where I'm having to focus on movement and other stuff like that, so that I'm still getting damage on the boss, where otherwise you would just be running for your life the whole time. So I really like this because it gives you that added benefit when you have to move of still getting some damage on the boss. So it's really kind of nice. Alright, so that's the best that I can wrap up the early game build. Really just keep pumping through it, boo. There's a very long period of time of building your character in this game, so don't feel super rushed that you have to have something worked out right out the gate. this will work really well for you in a lot of missions. Other builds are a little bit more specific and a little bit more towards the mid-game kind of side of things. So let's go ahead and take a look at the one that I'm running around with right now, because at the moment I'm hanging out in Hell's Kitchen, hoping we see a Red Skull pop up there. But that's that's a video for another time. Work on your activity log, kids. You got to. You absolutely have to. But this is my mid-game boss killing build. This is really amazing single target damage with a lot of high guard break on it. It's a very good build against bosses. Drawbacks of the build we're about to go through are that in AoE situations, it doesn't really come through. Now, I did include some stuff in this kit to help in those situations, but for the most part, this is really a bruiser build. Like, you just meant to be getting in some hard hits. So in fights that you know it is just a single target boss you have to worry about, this is going to be really good, but you don't want to take this in against every single boss. So like Nebula is someone you'll have to fight several times in the game. Nebula loves to throw down these spear thingies in the ground that when she charges up will make lightning strikes happen on them. So if a bunch of those get built up because they come out kind of quickly in the fight and you don't have a really good consistent way of destroying them, you'll have a bad time, boo. You're gonna have a really bad time. So there are fights where you can't just walk in with this build, and I just want to make sure we prefaced with that. I don't want anyone showing up to be like, hey man, I showed up with your boss killer build at Nebula's fight and got stomped for 40 minutes. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. So very first thing, we're again rocking with Master of the Mystic Arts. This one just hangs out in every single build, but we specifically are going with its third master, Barrier Curse, where it just does a dumb amount of damage and has the highest guard break that you can get. This is an amazing move to be hitting bosses with, because a lot of the time once you get into the point where you're mid-game, you have very small damage windows where you're able to do things to the bosses. There is a lot of movement involved and you have to be on your toes or you will spend an hour trying to beat some of these levels. I know, I've been doing it myself. So with those smaller windows and them needing to be more impactful, having a skill like this, which is only single target but hits like a truck, it's gonna be your buddy. It's gonna be your buddy. Next one that we've got up is in a very similar style. It's the 7 rings of that again, but it's the third mastery, which again is single target and just absolutely insane damage. If y'all can't see that, that's 1000% right there, okay? That's showing up with a little bit of hurt. Now, this doesn't have really any guard break on it, so this one is mostly for just putting some damage in there in one of those short windows where you can only really stop for a second, pop off 2 attacks, and then need to keep going. So I'm a fan. On this one, we also brought back our giant purple friend. This is one of the only things in the build for really adding or trying to control groups and have some AoE viability in the build. But it also has the added benefit of if we use it in a boss fight and the boss stays within this window, it's got medium guard break on it and does a little bit of damage. It's not showing up like our first 2 skills are for damage, but it's showing up and doing a little bit of work, and we really appreciate that here. So next one up after that is going to be one that I just got and I absolutely love. Astral Projection, until you get this mastery, is kind of a meh move for me personally, because both of its earlier iterations essentially take you straight into the fight. And with Doctor Strange, you have the ability to fly around, be pretty evasive, and kind of fight from the outsides and do very well from that. So moves that make you dive into groups and then just stand there, not my favorite. Not my favorite and not a big fan. The second version of it gives you some stamina back for each target that you happen to dash through when doing that move, and it increases the amount of damage that it's doing a little bit. But it's still, in my opinion, pretty lackluster. It's not until we get Illusionist Mastery on it that I think it's really starting to shine. So a couple of things you might be immediately curious of, like, okay, we got 2 little clones. Do they really move around or do anything? Nah, they pretty much just stand in the exact spot you summon them. But they attack anything in that range, and they're actually doing damage. They're not just imaginary friends hanging out that other people can see. They really doing some hits in here. It's not a crazy amount of damage, but when, again, we're talking about boss fights and having those really small damage windows, being able to pop these guys up close to the boss and then doing all of your movements that you have to, that's going to be your friend. That's going to be your friend that beats up the people you don't like. That's a good friend. Actually, don't have friends that beat people. If you want to beat people, don't beat people. Like, you know, hug something out. I don't care. But it's a little bit bullying, and it's really, really nice in this instance. Things do not target them really, though. I have had some minor success with what seems to be, in boss battles, the boss is targeting some of their skills at them. But when it comes to auto-attacking and smaller units, they kind of just ignore that those guys are there. So just something to keep in mind, but it's some really nice, consistent poke damage that you want on your boss build. You want on your boss build. So last one on this one is the Eldritch Sword. So this is kind of like the Astral Projection, where the initial version of it takes you straight into the enemy team. And I'm not, again, like we said before, a big fan of that. Secondary mastery for it basically turns it into some stuff that you're just throwing. And this has one of the best ranges in terms of how far away you can use it and hit stuff out of any of the skills that I've seen so far. So it is absolutely amazing for boss fights because it's one of the safest forms of damage that you can get out of spells. You're not highly exposed. You're not locked into one spot doing something for a second. You've got some time. You'll be okay. And yeah, no, I'm a fan of that one. That's a pretty good one. And I can't believe we're already at 17 minutes, so I'm gonna try and hustle through this last one. But this is what I'm running around with and doing a lot of my mid-game questing with. I'm doing some boss fights like Nebula with a build like this. And, you know, it's my normal we grind and stuff build. So starts off with what should be a crowd favorite at this point, Master of the Mystic Arts on its second mastery, just doing that big old grouping. Then we've got the 7 rings of that. Again, second mastery. So this is part of where we're getting some really consistent AoE, especially with the grouping of the first skill. We're still using this even though it's not crazy damage like its third mastery is. But this is really, really helping me still control mobs and get some good AoE damage in when I'm fighting a lot of things. I also really like this skill because you can zap them with that and then start flying away. Because there is some stuff that I'm fighting in groups at this level that hurts a little bit that I don't want just beating on me because potions are expensive. So I like being able to use this, hit them with that, and then get some distance between me and them, all while that entire group is just because the lightning's jiping between them. I'm a fan of that one. I'm a fan of that one. So another one that until you get this third mastery, you can technically use the second mastery for this because it's kind of still filling the same role in terms of it's kind of just there to do damage and also help AoE a little bit. So at the first part of this skill where you see it's kind of just spinning in front of him, that's doing damage right there. So if you're doing that in something's face, it takes a good amount of damage before this shoots out and then starts damaging everything in a line. That's pretty nice. That's gonna be your buddy. But it's something that you have to use a little bit exposed. So one of the best ways that I find to use this is to, say, you know, group them up with the first skill, suck them all in together, and then apart from what I said a second ago, I will fly down in front of them, pop this up, and it'll usually help me murder just about 2/3 of them right off the get-go, and then I start working on finishing up the rest of them. So it's good. It does some solid damage. But, you know, if you're not at that level yet where you have this one, the second one can definitely fill this slot. No problem. And then from there, we again pick up Astral Projection. This is one of the things. I kind of have it on this build more to help with boss damage and everything, along with the Eldritch Sword on the Talamandals. And again, it's just because you want to have a nice balance of being able to, you know, have decent AoE and still be able to fight bosses or fight high HP units and you live. So let me know what you guys think. Those are basically my 3 builds that I'm kind of going with right now. I can't believe this ended up being 20 minutes. Jesus Christ, I'm sorry. But I'm absolutely loving this game. I have been absolutely stuck to it. I think we might talk about some free-to-play guide stuff tomorrow on this one. Because I am starting to notice some things where you want to be careful and you need to be making sure you're doing a couple of things as a free-to-play, so that you minimize your downtime as much as possible. So really just how to kind of maximize the amount of squad power you're getting and everything for that level. So I think we're going to go ahead and call it here, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for making you sit there for 20 minutes. But I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for stopping by today. We're going to have to make sure we find the button. There we go. All right, people. Deuces.